Good heavens. Thank you, Brooke. Mr. Speaker, my honor to participate today. I never met Jefferson. I knew Madison very well. Okay. On a very serious note, so I saw you on Fox's morning show the other day talking about Mr. Trump's life being saved again, being providential, and God protected him twice. I want to ask you, Donald Trump is going back out on the campaign trail today. He will be in Michigan, and then tomorrow he will be campaigning actually for your House seats in Long Island. It's very important. But my bigger point is, how is it possible, what has transpired, that there has not been a presidential order to give Trump full presidential protection? How is this possible? I'm outraged by this.
We should be outraged, and we're making every demand for that to happen. The Secret Service, as you've seen reported, suggests that they have a manpower shortage. And look, this is about allocation of resources. I was talking with Chad Wolf about this, who had a lot of experience over Homeland Security, and the challenges are there, but they must be met. The last director of the Secret Service, the one that resigned right after the Butler, Pennsylvania debacle, had said on video that her primary responsibility was diversity in her employment rank. And one has to wonder whether that has something to do, some connection with the lack of personnel that they've been able to recruit and train over the last couple of years. It's a serious problem. It must be addressed. I'm not so sure it's a funding issue, but Congress will be willing to do what's necessary.
It's a political issue.
It's a political issue.
It's a political issue, and there is a person who can make this happen at the snap of the fingers. I mean, Harry Truman used to say the buck stops here. His name is Joe Biden.
Yeah. All
right. Now, I don't know Kamala Harris's role in any of this. I don't even know who's running the country right now. Right. That's one of the great mysteries. But I am really, look, I had two senators on our show last night. I had Tommy Tuberville and I had Rand Paul. Okay. Rand Paul actually is the ranking oversight in the Senate over Homeland Security. I point at my pal Chadwell. Both of them think there may well be another attempt on Trump's life once you let the cat out of the bag, if it were. So I'm just saying, what is Biden waiting for? Manpower? I don't believe that. Reallocate people, money. You're going to, I mean, have you talked to the president? You are the Speaker of the House. Who is going to force him to make this decision?
I will go stand on the doorstep and stomp my feet until he does it, but they don't let me talk to the president very often. That may not be a big surprise to you all. We communicate through staff. It's a pretty sad situation, and in fact, it's a pretty scary situation. But look, we have a task force that was already investigating the Butler, Pennsylvania lapses in security. We're going to change the emphasis of that to have both events investigated. But we all know the problem. It's a lack of leadership, right? And it goes all the way to the top. And so you'll see us demanding that this week. We've got to protect our 45th president, who I believe is going to be the 47th. He's the most threatened person on the planet. He has to have the protection that he needs, and we're going to make sure that happens.
And I just want to add one thing. I do not regard this as a partisan story right now.
Shouldn't be.
I mean, it shouldn't be. This could easily happen to a Democrat. Ms. Harris is on the campaign trail, too. Lord knows this is a very strange period, not an altogether happy one, as you outlined in your excellent speech. I'm just saying somebody has to someone in the media has to catch up to Joe Biden if he surfaces someplace and ask him, why haven't you made the order to give Donald Trump full presidential protection? That's all. Just ask him. I mean, he might have an answer.
Well, that's right. And if it's a manpower shortage, then we will rely on the local and state law enforcement who can partner and help and fill in the gaps. Whatever's needed, we'll reimburse them for their services. But Governor DeSantis was suggesting that in Florida.
Mm-hmm.
You know, we'll do what's necessary to protect our leaders. It's a basic function of the government.
All right. Well, I just thought I'd put that out there. The other thing I wanted to ask you, you did mention this in your talk about Peace of Strength. There's a very, very good column by my friend Walter Russell Mead in today's Wall Street Journal. He's a very smart guy, foreign policy expert. And his title of the column is U.S. Shrugs as World War III approaches. And essentially, it's a discussion of the unholy alliance between Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. It's also a discussion on the report of the Commission on the National Defense Strategy, which is a bipartisan commission, as I'm sure you know. We do not have deterrence. We have appeasement. Sanctions have been lifted on these enemy countries. Tariffs may be called for. Mr. Trump, I think, would use tariffs for non-trade purposes, but we don't know that yet. The military budget has declined in real terms for a number of years right now. So with respect to peace through strength, Mr. Meade suggests, and I think you hinted at this in your excellent talk, at the moment we have neither peace nor strength. What are we going to do about it?
He's right. We have to have a total refocus. It's about prioritizing spending. We're at the most dangerous moment since World War II. I don't think there's any dispute about that. And you're exactly right, and he's right. Russia, China, Iran, North Korea are coordinating together because you see a moment of opportunity. We projected weakness on the world stage for the last 4 years, and it's gotten us into this terribly dangerous situation. I just, last weekend before last, I had to fly. The terribly ill-timed G7 speakers meeting was in Verona, Italy. It's the only international trip I've made as speaker because I don't have time to do it, but I could not be there because we're the United States. And so our allies are there and they're waiting, and you have a sense of the importance of the United States generally, but when you go into a forum like that, when you're with allied nations, you realize how important America is. And Reagan used to remind us, I think it was Pope Pius XII who said after World War II, the leadership of the free world was placed upon the shoulders of the United States. We carry that responsibility with all the burden that comes along with it. But if we're not strong, and if we do not project strength, and we do not send a chill down the spines of our adversaries, then freedom is endangered all around the world. A strong America is good for the whole planet. How do we fix it, Larry? We got to get Donald J. Trump elected president again, okay? They fear him, and our allies respect him.
And we will have to increase defense spending.
Yes.
Which is dropping below 3% of GDP.
Yes.
As I said, when I was a child, as Reagan's assistant budget director, it was about 6.5% of GDP. He had built it all the way up because of what Carter had done. And I'll just add, since we're quoting scripture here, did you just quote scripture?
I always do. I'm sure I probably did.
I'm not that good at quoting scripture, but Walter Russell Mead's much smarter than I am, and he concludes his piece today, the prophet Ezekiel, whom I've never met. The prophet Ezekiel spoke about the duty of the watchman on the city wall to sound the trumpet when enemies approach. Now, that is one heck of a relevant quote.
Well, you're acting as an Ezekiel, and so is he, and we do need watchmen on the wall because these are dangerous moments. But I believe we can return to the principle of peace through strength, and I believe that will be good. Our allies will respect us, our enemies will fear us, and as President Trump rightfully said on the stage of the convention, we didn't have all this under my watch, right? You didn't have Russia invading Ukraine and Iran and its proxies attacking Israel. You didn't have China with all of its provocations and, buying up farmland next to our military installations. I mean, none of that stuff happened on Trump's watch because he was a firm hand at the wheel, and that's what we need again, desperately. Imagine Kamala Harris as the commander-in-chief of the U.S. military. It's inconceivable that we would be in that situation. So we got to fight harder than we ever have.
Did you see the movie, Reagan?
I haven't seen it yet, but we're screening it for all members Monday night.
You better see it.
Auditorium.
I mean, you got to see it.
I haven't had time for a film yet, but I can't wait.
I double as a film critic also, but you really should see it. It's.
I probably shouldn't say this publicly.
I don't know Dennis Quaid. I've never met him. I have talked to him by phone. I know John Voight very well, who plays the mythical KGB retired agent. Anyway, it's worth seeing, if nothing else.
Well, we've invited Dennis Quaid to join us for the congressional screening Monday night. I think he's trying to make it, so you should come and visit with him. It'd be awesome. Yeah.
I'll accept the invitation. Just saying. Back to business here. Vice President Kamala Harris has the speech she gave before the Democratic convention speech which Newt Gingrich thinks is the more important of the two speeches, and I tend to agree. And you mentioned big government socialism several times in your speech today. It's a $2 trillion spending package without a single pay for, okay, number one. Price controls on groceries and food and maybe others. We looked at that, by the way. The margins for the food and grocery business are less than 1%, the profit margins. I mean, if you want a profit, you want to go after somebody, go after NVIDIA. They have a profit margin of about 40%. I don't want to go after any of them because I don't believe in price controls, but I'm just saying to blame grocers is absolutely crazy. $25,000 of free money for housing will just raise the price of housing. I think you mentioned that in your speech. And I wanted to ask you not only your overall sense of that package, which I think says a lot and hasn't been given enough visibility, but with regard to all of the various increases in child credits and unearned income tax credit, are there work requirements? I think not, but you're the speaker. I'm just I'm whatever I am. I work for Fox, fabulous Fox Business. But really, are we ponying up more and more money with fewer and fewer work requirements? So basically, the government is in the business of paying people not to work.
That's what it looks like. I mean, and that's their ideology, and that's what Marxists do. I mean, President Trump labeled her as a Marxist in the debate. That was not an epithet. That's an actual description of her philosophy. And so none of this should surprise us. Now, I don't know the details about her plan. I mean, she doesn't either, by the way. Whoever drafted it, she couldn't answer any of these questions. But that's where all of this is headed. The idea that they would do price controls, they would blame the grocery stores for the cost of your groceries is madness. It's a blame-shifting game. That's the other thing that Marxists do all the time. Socialists, they want the government to control everything, and they blame the producers. And it's crazy. We want government price controls. We want federal bureaucrats in Washington determining what the cost of eggs and milk is in your local store. It's crazy. The reason the costs are so high is obvious. It's because of their drunken spending habits and the regulations they placed on every industry. It costs more to transport goods to your grocery store because of their crazy Green New Deal mandates and all the rest. I mean, they create the recipe for the economic disaster, and then they blame it on the people who are trying to keep the economy going. It's really cruel. It's very immoral, and that's why we got to stop them.
There's a big section in there about lawn care. I don't know whether you're familiar with it.
Lawn care?
Lawn care.
That was my first business.
When
actually.
It was. I
might go back to it soon. I'm not sure.
This interview she had with the local affiliate in Philadelphia was all about lawn care, but I digress.
Sure, she's an expert in the subject.
I want to talk about something else, student loans. You're a constitutional lawyer, scholar. Did I miss something, or did the Supreme Court say the president does not have the authority to cancel student loans? I'm not a lawyer, Lord knows.
They have no regard for what the court says. They don't respect it, and these are all political ploys. But this is the idea that you would shift the cost to people who chose not to pursue a degree. Somebody goes and gets a $200,000 master's degree in European poetry or something. To say that we're going to make moms and dads who didn't go to school, who had to go work hard, and they're trying to feed their family, that they should pay for that is again, immoral. Everything that they're proposing is. We got to make sure people understand, because they don't, Larry, as you know. You don't just wave away the debt. It doesn't disappear. You shift it to everyone else, and it's wrong. And once people understand that, when they're made to understand it, I explain it in terms, when I talk to college students, university students, young people, I say, imagine we all went to dinner tonight, and you're trying to live on a budget, and you decide to order the less expensive entree, and you drink water for the meal, and you try to be a good financial steward of your limited resources, but all your friends drink and order the most expensive wine and the most expensive item on the table, and then the bill comes, and they say, let's all divide it equally. How do you feel about that? Okay, well, that's Kamala Harris's economic plan, right? If you're on board for that, then go vote for her. If you're not, if you want fairness, if you want to reward financial responsibility and stewardship, then you need to be thinking on our side. I will say this. One of the reasons I'm so optimistic about this election cycle is that I've been traveling the country nonstop, and I believe that we are going to see, when the math is done post-election, that we're going to have a demographic shift in the electorate this time. I believe we're going to have a record number of Hispanic and Latino voters and Black and African American voters, and the Jewish community so energized for our side. People are fed up with the way things are. They're fed up with the cost of living and the rising crime rates and the open border and the weakness on the world stage, and they're looking for solutions. And so we have candidates who have the right answers to all the great challenges, Larry. We know the policy prescriptions, and when we produce that in the right, we present that in the right tone, it makes a world of difference. So that's our burden right now, all of us. Our responsibility is to make sure we're talking about this. Don't assume that people understand these basic truths anymore, because they don't.
Look, there's roughly, it's either 1.6 or 1.7 trillion dollar loan portfolio. It's sitting in the Department of Education in its entirety as a result of some Obama regulatory changes. I looked at this when I was at the NEC. There are no people in the Education Department that have ever done any credit work or income analysis, no credit analysis. So it's in the wrong agency. So I guess one thing I'd ask you, if you're able to, if you have the levers of power to do this, number one, can we move the loan portfolio out of the Education Department? At the very minimum, put it in the Federal Financing Bank run by the Treasury. They know something about workouts. That's a possibility. And number two, why not return to private lending where you have banks and other non-bank lenders who do know something about creditworthiness, credit analysis, and how to read an income statement? I mean, Obama said no more private lending. It strikes me that was an enormous mistake and one of the progenitors of this whole catastrophe.
Yeah, of course. And anytime you take the free market components out of something, the costs are going to go up. And we have these universities that have not been good stewards of those resources at all. In fact, after the rise of the anti-Semitism and all the madness that we've seen exposed now on these campuses, we're looking very closely at these billion-dollar endowments that they have that they're allowed to keep tax-free. We're looking at, the student visa program. By the way, if you're a young aspiring terrorist in some Middle Eastern nation, you don't get to come here and come to our university campuses on our dime and terrorize your Jewish classmates, right? Like, that's, hello, that shouldn't be allowed. We're looking at all the funding streams that all these universities get, and the reason the cost of education has skyrocketed is because the government has intervened too much and done all this. That's what makes the costs go up and, frankly, the quality go down.
And on the subject of DEI, which you also mentioned in your speech, as you know, nearly all of the spending programs passed in recent years. Now, Ms. Harris was the deciding vote in the $1.9 trillion, whatever it was, American Relief Plan in 2021. That was one of the precursors of the inflation, and she was the deciding vote in the misnamed Inflation Reduction Plan. That was another inflationary bill. On the other hand, in those bills and other bills, including the CHIPS bill, including the infrastructure bill, there were DEI regulatory specifications throughout those bills. There's a story that runs, it's pretty well out there now. For the Federal Communications Commission, let's see if I get this right, 40-some-odd billion dollars was appropriated to the purposes of connecting rural broadband and so forth. We looked at, I had those accounts at the NEC. I would have known how to spend $40 billion. But the point is, they haven't spent a nickel. Not one nickel has been spent of that so-called $40 billion coming out of that bill because they're not meeting all of the regulatory, including the DEI specifications. And cable providers and other service providers are just throwing up their hands so we can't play because we can't do this.
It implodes on
$40 billion.
Itself. Yeah.
Not a nickel's been spent. I know the one about the electric chargers. They haven't spent even $7 billion no, there were, or something like that. Anyway, no electric charge. But this is another one. Either you change the regs, just get rid of it.
Yeah.
Just get rid of it.
Well, that's what
save taxpayers a nickel.
That's what we will do. They have infused ESG,
Promise?
DEI, all this nonsense into all the government programs, so they don't work, and it implodes on its own weight, and that's completely foreseeable outcome of this nonsense. Look, when you're talking about lending and retirement accounts. I mean, under the Trump administration, there were some great rules made to prevent all that. The Biden and Harris administration reversed it. When you go to a bank, you don't want a liberal bank or conservative bank, an activist bank, a social justice warrior bank. You want a good bank. You want the ones that will handle your money right.
No,
you want a fiduciary. You don't want a social justice warrior. They're trying to infuse their ideology and their woke left policies into everything, and it destroys everything that it infects. We have the evidence now to prove that. These are not theories anymore. We can show that these programs don't work because of their madness.
Well, the other part is, I mean, it's worth a try that obligated but unspent funds can be completely rescinded. I mean, I think you mentioned the stupid IRA bill.
Yes.
That could be up to $1 trillion. The student loans, that could be $500-600 billion. I mean, you add it up, it's real money. You're going to need the money because I'm going to get the Trump tax cuts 2.0 in a minute. But, I mean, these things, if it's obligated, if it's authorized but not spent, right, take it out.
Exactly.
Pull it back.
And what we talk a lot about is if we get unified government again, we want to be very aggressive. I think we have a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity with the overturning of the Chevron doctrine to claw back Article 1 authority, speaking of the Constitution, to the legislative branch. And we work on that very aggressively. And also, we need to authorize before we spend. That's the way this is supposed to work. Congress hasn't done that in a long, long time. So you can save a lot of taxpayer funds if you do it more responsibly. We have aggressive plans to do that.
If you don't, we're going to sick Elon Musk on you.
No, I had Elon in my office 6 or 7 weeks ago.
He's ready.
Oh, he's ready to roll.
He's ready. He's got itchy fingers. That's what we need, itchy fingers. Drill, baby, drill. Drill, baby, drill. You have a good bill, H.R. 1, which the House has passed. The Senate never passed it. That's too bad. Just as a point, my pal Faulkner here in the front row, when Trump goes through this, he should do better on the explaining. So if you do the permitting reform, okay, or redo, because we had one federal decision, that was an NEC account also. But, energy costs permeate the entire economy. That word permeate, which is a Faulkner word, said on a terrific TV show I know of. But in all seriousness, that's what could actually bring prices down.
Yes.
So if you permit more and you produce more, say you go from 13 million barrels a day, where that was the peak 4 years ago. They're back to 13 million, big deal. They should be at 16 million barrels a day or some such thing. If you do that and the price drops back to, let's say, $40, $45, I have a list, I'm not going to bore you with it, but there's 200 or 300 items of ordinary consumer goods, healthcare goods, all kinds of things, whose price would fall as the price of petroleum and related, like petrochemicals. All that stuff would fall. There you go.
Yes.
Right.
We should permeate every area of the economy.
Yes.
With our energy supply. Look, it is maddening public policy to turn off the spigots, and that's what we've done. I confronted President Biden myself personally about his executive order to pause LNG exports, for example, and this has been reported, so I'll just tell you, it's already public. But I confronted him. I said, why would you do that? You're fueling Vladimir Putin's war machine because our European allies have to get their natural gas and energy needs from Russia instead of us. They desperately want it. I've spoken to them. Why would you do it? He said, I didn't do that. I said, yes. Yes, you did. And this is just a few weeks after the executive order, and he tried to argue with me that it didn't happen. And he said, oh, you misunderstand. That's just all I signed was an order to conduct a study on the effects of LNG. I said, no, sir. I'm from Louisiana. The export terminals are in my state. That's not true. I'm not sure he actually knew what he was doing there, Larry, which is back to the question earlier, who's running the country. It's pretty frightening. But it's had untold disastrous economic and national security effects and implications. And yes, it permeates it. And energy policy is at the center of our economic strength, and we've got to turn it back on. And energy dominance is the buzzword.
Did you ever ask him why he relaxed the oil production sanctions and shipping on Iran, which has gone from foreign exchange, I don't know, less than $1 billion worth of foreign exchange to $70-80 billion. It's all oil money. It's all oil production money sold to China. Or did you ever ask him if he's thought about China right now? China, which is buying the oil from Iran, okay, most of it, half of it, more than half of it, and buying oil from Russia, China is basically financing 2 wars against the United States through its oil purchases, all right, which was supposed to be sanctioned. Now, I know somebody that would slap a whole lot more tariffs on China if they ever pulled that kind of trick. But basically, did you ever ask him about, does he have any sense of what China is doing, even though it never sees the light of day? Whenever they have these, they're sending another group over there now. I don't know what they do. I mean, I was in a trade group. We won several times. Lighthizer and Mnuchin were running it. We actually got a deal. I don't know whether they enforced it or not. But the point is, does he know? Does he understand that? China is financing 2 wars with oil money against the United States.
I wish we could get those answers, and I wish they would come to the table and have thoughtful discussions with us, but that doesn't happen. It hasn't happened for 4 years because they're pursuing this agenda, and it's terrible for the country. And so look, we have to defeat them at the ballot box. We have to win back the levers of power because it's too dangerous. As I mentioned, these 2 completely different visions. We will lose the country if we don't get this back in our hands, and we're going to be very responsible for it. But this one's for all the marbles, and everybody knows it.
All right, last one. I'll spare you. So I've never met a tax cut I didn't like, ever.
Me too.
That's pretty much my history. It's part of being growthier, and I am a supply sider. So we have I'm calling them tax cuts 2.0. We will extend, Mr. Trump wants to extend the tax cuts. He wants to reduce the corporate tax to 15%, which, by the way, he's right. That was the original plan that we all did back in 2015, was a 15% corporate tax cut, which would help raise real wages. He also wants the tax-free tips. He also wants to waive the tax on Social Security benefits, as you know. More recently, he wants to waive the tax on overtime. So that's good, and it'll make the economy growthier. We should be growing at 3-4% instead of 2%, all right? When you go through this, I've talked to Steve Scalise about this. Just want to get your quick take. You don't have to get bogged down. You're the speaker, not the green eye shade. But you're going to go into reconciliation, right? So that's going to be the method, I assume. And reconciliation will include spending cuts and the rescissions that we were hinting at before. But you could also go through tax expenditures and what we call base broadeners to have a more efficient, less complicated tax code. Would you be one? So as I see it, growth, spending reductions, and maybe base broadening. I mean, simplify the code, which is a very popular thing among Americans, in order to try to somehow finance all this.
Yes. I mean, you and I come from the same school of thought and same school of economics. I believe in all those principles, and simplifying the tax code.
You've never met a tax cut you ever hated.
Never.
I'm with you.
Yes.
I mean, I don't, yeah.
I mean, I genuinely
we should spend our own money.
That's right. What a concept.
Not let them spend it.
That's right. But if you limit the size and scope of government, you bring in a pro-growth economy with the principles that we've discussed, and you do regulatory reform, which I think is such an important part of it, right?
Yes.
I think they've got to go together. The Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was a phenomenal achievement, and it did so much good for the economy. But it was the regulatory reform that accompanied that was really the secret sauce, I think. And President Trump wants to take a blowtorch to the regulatory state, and I want to help him hold it. I mean, this is we have big, aggressive plans to do that. But again, we've got to have the levers of power. But I do think we use the tax code to incentivize growth, to reward hard work, to let hardworking families thrive again. We know the formula. It just takes political will to do it. And I think we're going to have a large enough group to do that. And I think we're going to have the majorities in both chambers, and we'll work with President Trump and all of you, the administration, to make this happen.
Speaker Johnson, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.